January 15th, 1919. Berlin. The Spartacus uprising has been completely crushed. The Freikorps, the paramilitary units of former officers and reactionary students that will later form the nucleus of the Nazi SA, are in control of the streets. And in the Hotel Eden, the headquarters of the Gardkavallerie-Schützen Division, 2 prisoners are being interrogated.
Right.
One is Rosa Luxemburg. She's 48 years old, slight, frail, suffering from a congenital hip condition that has caused her to limp since childhood. She is, the foremost theoretical mind of the German revolutionary movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other is Karl Liebknecht. He is the same age. He is the son of Wilhelm Liebknecht, one of the founders of the SPD. He was the only Reichstag deputy to vote against war credits in December 1914.
The only one.
They're taken from the hotel, they're murdered, their bodies are dumped. Luxemburg's in the Landwehr Canal, Liebknecht's at a morgue as an unknown man. The German Revolution has been beheaded. This is in Defense of October. Yeah. Episode 4. The World Revolution, Germany, the Comintern, and the Fate of the Soviet State. Part 2. The Murder of the Revolution.
The question this part takes up is, what happened when the counter-revolution struck the young German vanguard, and what were the international consequences of the defeat of the European revolutionary wave between 1918 and 1920? We are not taking sides here. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of any political faction. We are examining the historical events and ideas as they are presented in the source material.
Previously, the German working class rose with elemental force and the Kaiser fled. Workers' and soldiers' councils sprang up across the country.
Right, but on November 9th, 1918, 2 different republics were proclaimed in Berlin.
Exactly, the Bourgeois Republic by Scheidmann and the Socialist Republic by Liebknecht. The SPD leadership under Friedrich Ebert concluded a secret pact with the imperial generals to suppress the radical workers.
Yeah, and the councils voted to hand power over to a national assembly.
The working class held immense power, but lacked a revolutionary party. And the counter-revolution was organizing. So we need to place ourselves directly in the crisis of January 1919. The atmosphere in Berlin is just explosive. The SPD government, the mainstream social democrats who hold state power, takes a deliberate step to purge the revolution from the state apparatus.
Right, they dismiss Emil Eichhorn.
Exactly. He is the left-wing police president of Berlin, a member of the centrist USPD. In a city governed by armed councils and mutinous soldiers, the police president is a critical lever of power. Removing him is a direct provocation.
It was meant to be.
The workers respond with absolute fury. Hundreds of thousands pour into the streets. The revolutionary shop stewards, the network of radical factory leaders, call for armed resistance.
And street fighting erupts almost immediately.
Right. Buildings are seized, barricades go up. The newly formed Communist Party of Germany, the KPD, supports this call to arms. But we have a severe problem here. This uprising is entirely premature.
Yeah, the KPD is far too small, and the government is fully prepared.
We are looking at a massive elemental movement of the working class. It is like a powerful engine running at full speed without a steering wheel. The KPD had, only been born just weeks prior, breaking away from the USPD. So how does a vanguard party, barely days old, even attempt to guide this kind of explosive energy?
Well, the KPD had to establish total political clarity. They broke from the USPD precisely because that centrist organization vacillated between reformist compromises and revolutionary rhetoric. The workers required a definitive direction.
Right.
Rosa Luxemburg provided this foundation during her program address on the class nature of the war.
Yeah.
She told the workers, the Hohenzollerns were no more than the frontmen of the imperialist bourgeoisie and of the Junkers. The class rule of the bourgeoisie is the real criminal responsible for the World War, in Germany as in France, in Russia as in England, in Europe as in America. She laid the ultimate blame for the global slaughter squarely on the ruling class.
Wow, yeah.
And from that premise, she presented the movement with a stark, unavoidable choice about the future of human society. She argued, the World War confronts society with the choice: either continuation of capitalism, new wars, and imminent decline into chaos and anarchy, or abolition of capitalist exploitation. The words of the Communist Manifesto are the fiery writing on the wall above the crumbling bastions of capitalist society: socialism or barbarism. This was the absolute limit of human survival.
The reality of that choice materializes immediately on the streets of Berlin. The premature January uprising gives the government exactly the excuse it needs to crush the radical workers.
Right. The counter-revolution requires a commander. And Gustav Noske steps forward.
Yeah, he is a prominent SPD leader, but he willingly accepts the role of organizing the military destruction of the uprising. He is tasked with turning the remnants of the imperial army against the working class.
Noske summarized his own historical function with complete precision when he stated, "Somebody has to play the bloodhound." He accepted the necessity of lethal violence to restore state authority.
And the violence is immediate and just overwhelming. The Freikorps unleash a massive artillery attack right in the center of Berlin. They target the Vorwärts building, the historic headquarters of the SPD's own newspaper, which has been occupied by the radical workers. Heavy guns fire point blank into the walls. The structure is reduced to rubble.
And when the surviving defenders attempt to surrender and negotiate, they are brutally executed.
This requires a moment of deep examination. The SPD was the largest working-class party in the world. They built the unions, they built the newspapers. So how does the leadership of that exact party deploy reactionary imperial soldiers to massacre their own base of support? Like, what is the internal logic of this betrayal?
Well, the SPD leadership had entirely fused their political existence with the survival of the capitalist state. Once they committed to defending bourgeois property relations, the radicalized workers ceased to be their constituents and became their primary existential threat.
That makes perfect sense.
The violence was not an accident, it was a structural necessity. Luxemburg captured the sheer physical reality of this state terror in her final article. She wrote about the government's rampaging troops massacring the mediators who had tried to negotiate the surrender of the Vorwärts building, using their rifle butts to beat them beyond recognition. Prisoners who were lined up against the wall and butchered so violently that skull and brain tissue splattered everywhere. The state reasserted its power through absolute physical destruction.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah, and Luxemburg immediately understood that this was not a uniquely German phenomenon. She connected the violence in Berlin directly to the historical mechanics of class war.
Exactly.
She wrote, "Who is not reminded of that drunken celebration by the law and order mob in Paris, the bacchanal the bourgeoisie celebrated over the corpses of the communards? That same bourgeoisie who had just shamefully capitulated to the Prussians and abandoned the capital to the invading enemy, taking to their heels like abject cowards. Oh, how the manly courage of those darling sons of the bourgeoisie flared back to life against the poorly armed, starving Parisian proletariat and their defenseless women and children." The massacres of the Paris Commune were repeating on the streets of Berlin.
Which brings us right back to January 15th, the terrifying scene at the Hotel Eden, the double murders of Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht.
Right.
This decapitation of the vanguard was not some random act of street violence. It was a calculated political assassination. Captain Waldemar Pabst ordered these executions, and he did it with the direct authorization of Gustav Noske. The state eliminated its most capable theoretical and political opponents.
Decades later, Pabst explained exactly how this chain of command operated.
Right.
He wrote, "It is obvious that there was no way I could have carried out the action without Noske's support with Ebert in the background, and that I had to protect my officers. But very few people have understood why I was never called to testify or charged with an offense. As a cavalier, I acknowledged the SPD's behavior at the time by keeping my mouth shut for 50 years about our cooperation." The betrayal by social democracy was protected by a military code of silence.
The timing of this is incredible. Just one day before she is murdered, on January 14th, Luxemburg writes her final article. It is titled, "Order Prevails in Berlin." The counter-revolution is literally closing in on her.
Yeah.
The uprising is collapsing in blood. It is like a captain calmly diagnosing the exact structural flaws of the ship's hull, even as the water rushes in to drown her. How did she analyze this defeat in real time?
She evaluated the mechanics of the uprising with total objective clarity. She recognized the fatal disconnect between the energy of the masses and the immaturity of their organizations.
Yeah.
She wrote, "The contradiction between the powerful, decisive, aggressive offensive of the Berlin masses on the one hand and the indecisive, half-hearted vacillation of the Berlin leadership on the other is the mark of this latest episode. The leadership failed. But a new leadership can and must be created by the masses and from the masses. The masses are the crucial factor. They are the rock on which the ultimate victory of the revolution will be built." Her confidence in the working class remained entirely unbroken.
That's amazing.
She contextualized the crushing of the Spartacus uprising within a much broader view of human development.
Right.
She observed, "The whole road to socialism, so far as revolutionary struggles are concerned, is paved with nothing but thunderous defeats. Yet at the same time, history marches inexorably, step by step, toward final victory. Where would we be today without those defeats? from which we draw historical experience, understanding, power, and idealism.
Yeah.
She saw historical progression as a process built on the foundation of temporary failures.
Right.
And her final published words demonstrate a total rejection of the government's temporary military victory.
Yeah.
She declared, "Order prevails in Berlin, you foolish lackeys. Your order is built on sand. Tomorrow the revolution will rise up again, clashing its weapons, and to your horror it will proclaim with trumpets blazing, I was, I am, I shall be." This was her final indictment of the ruling order.
So while the German Revolution is being drowned in blood in Berlin, we have to shift our focus to Moscow. It is March 1919. The founding Congress of the Third International, the Comintern, is convened.
Yeah, the vanguard is attempting to build a global steering wheel for the revolutionary engine.
Right. They are gathering to forge a centralized international leadership to coordinate the global working class.
Leon Trotsky authored the manifesto for this founding Congress. He established the historical legitimacy of this new organization right from the start.
Yeah.
He wrote, 72 years ago, the Communist Party proclaimed its program to the world in the form of a manifesto written by the greatest heralds of the proletarian revolution, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. We communists, the representatives of the revolutionary proletariat of the various countries of Europe, America, and Asia, who have gathered in Soviet Moscow, feel and consider ourselves to be the heirs and consummators of the cause whose program was affirmed 72 years ago. The Bolsheviks claimed direct historical continuity with the original communist movement.
That's a huge claim.
Trotsky then articulated the stakes of the current global conflict, challenging the victorious imperialist powers. He asked, "Is all toiling mankind to become the bond slaves of victorious world cliques, who, under the firm name of the League of Nations and aided by an international army and international navy, will here plunder and strangle some peoples and there cast crumbs to others, while everywhere and always shackling the proletariat with the sole object of maintaining their own rule? Or shall the working class of Europe and in the advanced countries in other parts of the world take in hand the disrupted and ruined economy in order to assure its regeneration upon socialist principles?" He framed this as a truly global economic and political struggle.
We see a revolutionary wave sweeping across the entire European continent. The objective conditions for revolution are everywhere. The empires have collapsed, the economies are ruined, the masses are in motion.
But we see a recurring pattern of immense power failing right at the finish line.
Exactly. In Hungary, the Hungarian Soviet Republic is formed. But Bela Kun liquidates the vanguard Communist Party by merging it directly into the Social Democrats. This hands political control right back to the reformists, dooming the revolution and bringing Admiral Horthy's brutal white terror crashing down on the workers.
Yep, and in Germany we see the Bavarian Soviet Republic. Eugen Levine mounts a brave, desperate defense of Munich, but the forces are isolated and overwhelmed. Levine is executed by firing squad.
And in Italy, we witnessed the Biennio Rosso, the 2 red years. By 1920, 500,000 metal workers are occupying the massive industrial factories of the North. They have the means of production, they are armed.
But the PSI, the Italian Socialist Party, proves to be maximalist in words only. They talk about revolution, but they absolutely refuse to lead the workers to seize state power.
Right, the movement exhausts itself. The factories are returned. And this failure clears the absolute path for Benito Mussolini and his fascist squads to take control of Italy. It is like watching a powerful body lacking a central nervous system to coordinate its limbs. To truly understand the consequences of this missing leadership, we return to Germany. It is March 13th, 1920. The Kapp Putsch begins. General von Lüttwitz marches his troops into Berlin to overthrow the Republic.
The SPD government, the very same government that used these troops to crush the workers, now finds itself targeted by them.
Yeah, the government flees Berlin in a total panic. They turn to the head of the army, General von Seeck, and order him to defend the Republic. He flatly refuses. He tells the government, soldiers don't fire on soldiers.
Wow.
The military stands aside. The bourgeois state completely collapses. So the working class acts alone. They launched the greatest general strike in German history. The country shuts down entirely.
Not a single train moves. Not a single factory operates.
The putsch is paralyzed. In the Ruhr Valley, this strike explodes into a full armed uprising. The workers form the Red Ruhr Army. They engage the military in massive pitched battles.
We have direct accounts of this fighting. Oscar Hipp was an industrial worker who participated in the battles in the Ruhr. He recorded his experience, stating, "I was in a unit with my brother-in-law. Some 15,000 workers surrounded the barracks. We only had a few weapons, a few carbines and hunting rifles we had confiscated from farmers, but nothing apart from that. 4 units were armed with the weapons seized at Merseburg. Young workers who had learned how to handle weapons during the war were involved. We were shot at with 7.5-centimeter shells, and our losses were heavy. A comrade in the Young Communist Association who worked in the Sicily mine was severely wounded next to me. Shrapnel from a grenade tore off part of his chin. The physical cost borne by the workers was catastrophic and intimate.
God.
But the workers defeat the push. They break the military coup. They save the republic, and this leads to the final horrific betrayal.
Right.
The SPD government returns to power in Berlin, and they immediately deploy the exact same Freikorps and Reichswehr units that just tried to overthrow them. They send these right-wing military units into the Ruhr to violently crush the very workers who had just saved the government from the military dictatorship. The state protects itself by slaughtering its saviors. Leon Trotsky analyzed the long-term trajectory of this political dynamic in 1933, tracing the origins of the collapse of the Weimar Republic.
Right.
He wrote, "The November Revolution, which gave the power to the workers and peasants' Soviets, was proletarian in its fundamental tendencies. But the party that stood at the head of the proletariat returned the power to the bourgeoisie. In this sense, the social democracy opened the era of counter-revolution before the revolution could bring its work to completion. As social democracy saved the bourgeoisie from the proletarian revolution, fascism came in its turn to liberate the bourgeoisie from the social democracy. Hitler's coup is only the final link in the chain of counter-revolutionary shifts. This specific chain of counter-revolutionary logic cemented the fate of Europe."
It's just staggering when you look at it all together.
It really is. And we must grasp the full theoretical significance of the decapitation of the German Revolution. The objective conditions for socialist revolution existed throughout Europe. The capitalist system was shattered by the war, the working masses were entirely mobilized and ready to fight, but the subjective factor was missing. The Revolutionary Party, a mature, tested leadership capable of guiding the masses to power, did not exist. The Comintern was founded in Moscow specifically to resolve this crisis of leadership on a global scale.
Yeah.
But the destruction of the German vanguard in 1919 deepened the total isolation of the Soviet state. The workers were repeatedly betrayed by their old organizations, and their new parties were too young and inexperienced to navigate the immense complexities of taking power. The tragedy of the 20th century was set in motion not in Moscow, but in Berlin in January 1919, when the Freikorps murdered Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht.
The revolutionary wave has been defeated across Europe. But why? What were the tactical and strategic lessons of this global defeat? Next time on In Defense of October. Episode 4, The World Revolution. Part 3, The Lesson. Lenin writes his final tactical masterpiece, Left-Wing Communism, an Infantile Disorder. The argument for working inside reactionary trade unions, for participating in bourgeois parliaments, and for the tactical method of the United Front. The consequences of the missing party next time on the conclusion of Episode 4.